Ready, David?
He's asking if you're ready. John,
We okay? So I call the meeting to order. We're missing one member, Tony Schiavone, and I don't know if he was planning to come or not.
he's not. Sorry.
He's not, okay, so 4 of the 5. Second item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Any comments on the agenda? It's a special meeting, so we can't add anything, but we could delete.
I'm good. I move we approve it.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Passed. We have no minutes to approve from the past.
Guess I
Okay.
should have took that off the agenda.
Yeah. Public comments on the agenda? None. We move to 5.5. Mr. Sharp, we ask you to present your audit report for 2019. If you would there, just so she can record it.
Good evening. Thanks for having me down this evening. I'm here to talk about the 2019 audit. So you should have gotten a little packet, a letter. It kind of describes the audit process this year, the issues with the findings of the audit, and summary of some items. I've also included a discussion of my new yellow book. I know that's a hot topic with all government entities these days, moving into the next audit year. So first thing I'm going to talk about is the audit timeline for 2019. And I'll go through this, summarize. We were notified August 6th that we were going to be retained as the audit firm for June 30th, 2019 audit. We delivered the audit contract and engagement letter the next day. We received back the approved contract and engagement letter on August 12th. That day, same day, we submitted it to the local government commission. They have to approve all contracts before we're even allowed to start on the audits. That contract was approved by the LGC on August 16th. August 21st, we received the first version of the trial balance from the town. We did have a couple other versions we received between that date and the start of field work, but we did receive the first trial balance on the 21st. 28th, we had the audit kickoff meeting with David, finance officer, some town staff, and a couple members of the audit committee. Field work started September 17th this year. The majority of the field work was completed that week. I did have one staff that came back the week after to run through a couple other items, and of course we were having some conversations between the auditors and the town staff between that date and October 10th when the first draft was sent to the town. The draft consisted of the audit, draft of the audit, the communications letter, the management letter, and the adjustments we had during the audit for 2019. Reeves & Associates received the MD&A on October 15th, 5 days later after giving the town the draft. The second draft, which included updating with the MD&A, was given to the town on the 17th. We received the correction action plan on October 29th. And then on the 30th, the third draft, which included that corrective action plan, was submitted to the town. We received permission to transmit the audit to the local government commission. The audit was transmitted to the local government commission on October 30th. Previous meetings, the due date is October 31st with an automatic 30-day extension. And so we did meet the first due date of October 31st, submitting the audit to the local government commission. November 12th, the local government commission approved the audit. There were no white letter comments this year. They approved as is. And so where we stand now is we are still in draft form with the audit, but we're waiting for final approval from the town. We're waiting to receive the signed management representation letter for the June 30th, 2019 audit, and then we'll be able to issue the audit to the town. Any questions so far on the audit proceedings, the timeline, and the status?
This version that we've got and the version tonight is the version that was submitted to the LGC?
Should be, yes.
Okay, because I know last time there were some questions about what was submitted.
Yes, there were no white letter comments this year and no changes. They approved as is. That should be the latest draft.
Okay, so if the board wants to approve it tonight, then they're approving the right one. Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thanks.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment. The last audit that you did was disrupted by lots of different things.
Yes.
This year, you were under stress we asked you to try to get it done by November the 1st. In spite of some delays earlier in getting you started, you've done this completely end to end before November the 1st. I thank you and congratulate you on being able to do that, but I know you had to pull staff to make that happen, because that kind of throws the schedule off when you rush to get it done. But it's a thumbs up for us, because all of a sudden we're no longer on that list of being late. So we
Yes.
appreciate that.
Thank you. We do know with the audit committee kickoff meeting, the town obviously wanted to get the audit done by October 31st, so we did make it a mission of ours to get it done, and we do thank the town staff for getting this information so we can complete that audit by October 31st.
Thank you.
And should this schedule be our proposed schedule for next year to make the deadlines, or is there something if you had to shift things around or timing?
I like that automatic 30-day extension, to tell you the truth. Because that always falls during hurricane season, and if we got automatic 30 days, I vote to take advantage of it. I know that why we did it, but
Yes. I said no red flags get thrown up by the LGC if you don't get it in by October 31st. Sometimes audits actually get approved a little quicker if you don't get it in, if you get it in after October 31st, because everybody's rushing to get it in at the last second. But you won't be on your watch list or anything. Like I said, October 31st is when they like it, but like I said, everybody gets 30-day automatic extension to December 1st if there are issues. As far as the timeline goes, obviously, my recommendation would be have a signed, approved contract by LGC a lot earlier than August 12th. We send out typically all our government contracts in March, so they're all approved, because obviously boards have to approve it, it has to go to the LGC and they have to approve it. And so, we typically have all approved contracts back in-house by May. Sometimes we do preliminary work, usually internal control work, that would be over the summer. So that can be some work that can be done ahead of time. And so we're, focusing on the numbers during the August, September timeframe. But, I said, with the financials being set up, the file being set up, that timeframe, we did have to cram some stuff in, but that timeframe generally works. Starting field work, probably like to start a little earlier than the middle of September, but we work with other municipalities where we start either the beginning of September or the end of September, and we still can get them in. So, the September timeframe works as long as information is given to us timely.
So if we were to, as David said, kind of take advantage of the extension, would that be upfront, or would that be spread throughout all this, or where would we put that extra time in?
If you took advantage of the extension, obviously the thing would be, field work, when you want to start that. If you're ready in middle of September, we go ahead and start, because, 2 years ago, in 2018 audit, obviously the hurricane came the Friday before we were scheduled to come out on Monday. So, there is that. Hopefully, hurricanes you can't predict, obviously. Hopefully there's not too many of those in the future, but that's something to take advantage of. To think about if you know there's going to be hurricane season, starting field work earlier or pushing it back later. Because auditors usually schedule large audits months in advance. We have our government schedule usually set up in June or July, so we know what the staffing is, we know what staff we're putting on each audit, and so we can get all those audits done, whether it's October 31st or December 1st. We want to schedule all large audits where we're going to be out of town or in the field for a week, 2 months in advance.
I noticed from the findings at the end of the audit report, the issue of what materials you get when you get from a town. You got our materials in a cash basis method. So this is a little bit different, I think, from what I'm seeing in other towns of what you had to do. You're not allowed next year, are you allowed to put the financials together for the town? Or will the town have to have somebody else put the financials together?
I do have a Yellow Book update. I don't know if you want to go over the findings and management letter points first, or you want to jump right into the Yellow Book update. That was the last on my agenda.
Appreciate that, yeah, just.
You want to go ahead and go start.
Can we do that? Yeah.
So Yellow Book did change, as mentioned earlier. And one of the things it's focusing on is, preparation of financial statements by the auditor. Auditors can no longer just ignore that. They have to identify as a threat to independence. And so the first thing you have to determine is if the unit staff has the SKE or the skills, knowledge, education to prepare the financial statements themselves. That's the first thing you have to determine. If they determine that they do not think the unit, and when I say unit, that could be a municipality, a county, a school board, charter school, if they do not believe that unit, government unit, can prepare the financial statements on their own, then the auditor cannot prepare those financial statements. Then they're considered impaired with their independence. So that's the first step they gotta do. They have to identify whether they think the town, in this case, can prepare their own financial statements.
Now, that's preparing the financial statements. Does that include the question of going from a cash basis to the accrual basis, and then in fact putting the financial statements together under the accrual basis?
Yes. Yes, I mean, the town should be keeping the books, depending on what fund it is, on a modified or a full accrual basis, as general section.
And when they don't, if you were in the past, you've also then gone from that to an accrual and then gone to putting the financial statements together.
Yes, during our audit process, if we identify accounts that need to be adjusted, we will adjust those in order to make sure that, because obviously the reason we're hired is to give an opinion on financial statements whether they're materially correct or not. If we don't make those adjustments, they're not materially correct, and therefore we can't issue an opinion, or at least issue an unmodified opinion this year.
So,
Yes.
you've been with us 2 years now. Will we be able to prepare our own next year?
I think the town's there's gonna be a couple things they're gonna have to do in order to prepare these. One, they're going to receive some additional training. I know some community colleges, LHC has CAFR training. Two, one of the things that you can do is, have an outside consultant that's independent of the firm. I know you got an outside consultant the last 2 years prepared at MD&A. You have to have somebody that can be responsible and oversee the financial preparation process. And that person has to have the SKE, where, let's say there's an emergency and something happened and the auditor can prepare it, they have to be able to prepare it. That's what we have to determine is, can the town or their consultant, if they decide to hire a consultant that's independent of the audit firm, prepare the financial statements? If they cannot, like I said, we cannot prepare the financial statements, we're no longer independent.
And that preparing is full GAAP accrual accounting?
It's full accrual for the government-wide, and all proprietary funds is modified accrual for the fund statements.
Okay. Okay.
Jay, I hate to argue with you, and I didn't bring it with me, I left it.
Yes.
But the letter from the state treasurer did not say they had to be able to do the statements. They had to be able to oversee somebody who was doing the statements. So I disagree with you just a little bit there.
Sure, they have to oversee, but when you oversee, you have to have a full working knowledge of the.
But you don't mechanically have to be able to do it.
You don't have, you don't sit there and write it, but you have to have the knowledge and skills
Yes.
to oversee, and, in our opinion, know the ins and outs of the government financial statements.
But your example of if somebody couldn't do it, this person had to step in is not totally correct from what I read.
Well, I mean, it's auditor judgment.
Yeah.
If I don't feel like somebody can prepare the financial statements, I don't see how they can oversee the preparation process, because they don't understand them if they can't prepare them, is where we get at. And I say it's a gray area. Somebody might say, if they can't prepare, that's fine. We think if they can't prepare it, they can't oversee the process because they don't know the ins and outs of the financial statements.
Yeah. Like I said, I know I'm splitting hairs with you, but when I read the letter, it didn't say, it said they didn't mechanically have to do it, but they had to be able to, they had to understand how to do it and be able to oversee somebody.
But the auditor can't do it.
The auditor
Right,
can't do it.
right.
That's
So
somebody
Gotta
has
be-
to do
it.
Somebody has to do it.
Somebody's gotta be able to do it. I assume in this scenario you're talking about, whoever it is in the town that's overseeing it is ultimately responsible.
That's right.
That it was done right,
That's
which
right.
gets to his point.
Yeah.
And then you can audit that.
Yes.
Okay. So typically, the firm, if we were to outsource that or bring somebody in, it's like a bookkeeping compilation firm? Who would you bring in?
It'd be preparing financial statements. As I said, and getting back to your items there, the outside consultant doesn't have to prepare it. They
Okay.
just have to have the ability to oversee it. And so therefore, we could prepare it then. If we had somebody that we felt like, hey, for example, we used to do the audit for Wake County schools, they had somebody prepare financial statements. And so they all oversaw the process. We've encountered some governments who had a consultant that came in and helped them monthly and oversaw the closing process, did not prepare the financial statements, but oversaw the process and had the skills to oversee the process, so therefore we could, prepare it ourselves, and they were reviewing it and making sure it was correct. So, obviously, the best case scenario is to have the town prepare it.
Yep.
I think 9 out of 10 auditors would tell you they'd rather have the town or municipality or the government unit prepare themselves. But I understand the majority of the audits taking place in North Carolina, the auditor prepares it currently. This is probably.
Could you repeat that, Jay? Could you repeat that statistic, please?
What's that?
Did you say 90% of the audits being prepared in North Carolina that the auditor is preparing?
I don't know the exact number. I'd say the majority of them are being prepared by the audit firm.
The financial statements?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You can go to the LGC's website, and they have, they list the fees for all the government units, and they separate them out between the audit, and there's a column for preparing financial statements. So if you look at that, you can see which, auditors were engaged to prepare the financial statements along with doing the audit.
Gotcha.
So next year, though, can that continue or can that not continue?
It can continue under these circumstances, but there's going to be a shift, in my opinion. There should be a shift, and that's why the Yellow Book was changed.
Yeah.
And there's going to be more government units that are going to be responsible for preparing them themselves or hiring somebody. There's going to be fewer and fewer auditors preparing these financial statements.
Because, I guess what I'm wrestling with is, isn't there a conflict of interest for the town to oversee you preparing their statements and then you auditing their statements?
That's what Yellow Books, eventually.
That's part I'm confused. If you were to, I guess bottom line question is, do you think you will do them next year, or do you think the town needs to have somebody else to prepare them?
I'm gonna make a comment here.
Yeah.
Is that this whole dialogue? It's ironic to me that this whole dialogue is initiated and result of the auditing profession decision and on how they're going to be able to do it. This has nothing to do with the local government commission or the town. This is a direct result of the auditing profession, direct decision on how to do accounting versus auditing.
I agree.
No,
And I see that as their role.
But you might point out that this is not new.
Yeah, this has been going on in the private sector forever.
I audited 30 years ago, and I was not allowed to audit my own work.
I was amazed that it
wouldn't even consider
existed
doing
as
it.
it did. Yeah, and it's,
But if you look at the bullet point number 2 here, it talks about safeguards they can do to bring the risk down to an acceptable level.
Chinese
like
firewall.
having another part of the firm doing it, or
That's right.
having whoever does it's not in the audit team. So, there's ways for your firm to do it, and you be able to substantiate that you have an elevated risk.
Yes, absolutely.
That's
Those
right.
are the safeguards. Like I said, the first thing we got to determine if the town unit staff or their outside consultant have the SKEs for the financial reporting. If we determine, hey, yes, then we can still prepare them and have these safeguards in place so that threat is reduced to an acceptable level.
I think to John's point, that requirement of having the SKE on staff has been part of GASB for a long time.
Yes.
Jay, I presume that since you've been involved, your firm's been involved in preparation of statements, that you have a standard template package that people can come out and fill in and it carries over the information from the prior year and all that kind of good stuff.
Absolutely.
Under these new guidelines, can you provide that system to towns like Holden Beach,
Yes.
that they can input data more or less into your system to facilitate this whole process?
Yeah, so we can provide those templates. As I said, we formatted them a little bit, but the templates, the LGC does have templates on their website, and basically that's where our templates come from. It's just formatted a little bit differently, and they update those.
Yeah, but just to facilitate the audit process and the like, it would seem to be a lot efficient and practical too.
Absolutely do this to the town.
so, I guess where I'm coming from is getting back to the schedule. I'd hate to be in a situation next June or whenever and say, whoa, we've got an issue because the town hasn't done them and you can't do them and we're scrambling. So, we're almost halfway into the year already. What do we need to do soon to prepare for a nice, smooth audit next year and not, at that time, raise the issue of we got to bring somebody in to do the preparation because you can't accept, you know.
Yeah, so, I mean, we're gonna be having that conversation with every governmental client, once we're engaged to do the 2020 audits. But the town, obviously wants to look and have an internal discussion on whether they think their current staff can oversee this process, or if they want to hire an outside consultant to either prepare it or oversee it. I know, like I said before, you've hired somebody to prepare the MD&A. I don't know if her full background is preparing financial statements. She has, obviously, I think she was the former Brunswick County Finance Officer, that's correct. So obviously, she's familiar with financial statements, government financial statements, so I mean, she'd be.
Hey, Tom, we have an agenda item 6 to have that discussion about what we're gonna do.
Okay.
So you talk about the audit results, the conclusions you had
Yes.
in terms of internal control?
So, first of all, the town did receive what we call unmodified opinion on the financial statements. This is obviously the best possible opinion the town can receive, and should be the opinion that the town's striving for year in, year out. So the opinion was unmodified. And so, with regard to findings and management letter points, we did have 2 findings, same findings as last year. The material weakness, really regarding the financial close / accrual, modified accrual process, and some deficiency regarding the financial reporting process. So those are unchanged. I will make a note on, our testing of accruals, whether it's receivables, payables. The town did do a better job in 2019 of accruing data than 2018. There were a good number of accounts that were accrued before we started field work, and there were some that, they were investigating during our field work and gave us the entries to complete those. And so the direction they're going in is the correct direction. We still did have a good number of audit entries that made it a material weakness. And it said, you probably heard the quote, Rome wasn't built in a year. And obviously with the 2018 audit being late as it was, I think the town probably did not have time to react to those findings. However, I said, you're making progress. There's still some steps to go, but you're heading in the right direction, which is good news. But you still do have a material weakness in regards to that process. We did have a total, the town gave us a total of about $600,000 worth of adjustments they made regarding some of these balances. We came up with about $2.4 million, which, like I said, we consider a material weakness. So that's why still material weakness. But the town was starting to do some of these processes and starting to make some of these adjustments themselves instead of relying on the auditor to do all of them. So you're heading in the right direction. My staff did have a chance to sit down with some of the town staff, specifically Margaret, and really, I think they sit down and spend a lot of time together talking about what needs to be done. I think the town now has a better understanding of the process that needs to be done to close the books out during the year. So, progress was made for 2019.
Yeah, I want to make a comment on that too, if I may. The numbers are what they are, but I'm going to take up for the staff is that we're paying this audit firm to perform this service for us. We're paying them twice what we've normally paid for an audit to do. So some of this work, yeah, we did it. Some of it, the approach that we took was we're paying them twice as much, let them do the work.
Okay, last time you were here, I think there were only 2 significant deficiencies. So one of them slipped to material weakness from.
No, it was the same.
The
They were
same.
last time it was the
It's the
same.
same.
Oh, really?
It's the same,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
both years, yeah.
No. This audit, last time, and I'm,
The 18 versus 19?
yeah, no, the 2019 audit, and I don't know if it was our last meeting. Somehow I
Yeah,
was
Jay
under the
gave a
assumption-
preliminary report that said there were 2 deficiencies. Unless something changes, that's what there'll be. Something changed, one slipped into a worse category. Is that
Okay.
correct?
Yeah, I
That's
just,
correct. When I was here for when we were on field work the week that the last audit committee.
Yeah,
was in,
yeah.
We were still in the middle of field work, and at that point, it was only a significant deficiency, but as we concluded our audit proceedings, there were additional adjustments that turned into a material.
so the magnitude of the adjustments exceeded materiality and,
Yes.
okay. And that was in between when you were here. Yeah, I remember that your field team was in there. Okay.
Yes, at the time, I presented the audit committee, that's why I said, at that time, the adjustments were not
Okay.
material. I said, as we concluded our audit proceedings, it became material.
Jay, what was the most significant of the 2.4 million? Do you recall?
It was just a lot of the accrual process, receivables, payables, inventory, getting those all corrected. I'll have to go back to the adjustments. I thought I sent the adjustments in the package. I may not.
They're not in this
Not the
package,
entire,
no.
not the detail.
Okay. I can send
And
that.
what is your dollar material amount for?
I'd have to go back and look, but it's around $100,000 for the town. And that will, obviously change every year depending on the expenditures or the assets of the town. It was around $100,000, I believe, but we also calculated by fund. And so your general fund is gonna be a little bit different than your water and sewer fund, than the B part fund, depending on what's going on in the activity of the year. And we calculate by fund and it has the financials as a whole.
So could you just clarify for the public, though, that the adjustments are just errors in accounting, not that anything was missing? No money's, no money missing, just we've accounted in the wrong account, put the charge in the
No,
wrong
I think
account.
it's a period issue
It's
that
a
we're
period
talking.
issue.
And it could be
He's
a period
talking about,
issue.
since we're on doing things on a cash basis, these were things or obligations or that were,
There's some misinterpretation of the public that meant something was missing, when in fact it's just an accounting shifting of
It's more
accounts.
of a fiscal, it's more of a fiscal year thing. Things are, either due to town or the town's due other people at year end that, we're not accounting for at year end. We didn't find anything missing during our
Yeah.
audit proceedings. Obviously, if we did, we were coming to, those charging
Jake,
governments.
were any of the adjustments affecting a cash balance of any kind?
There was one, but it was not affecting the overall cash balance. It was affecting two different cash accounts, so it didn't have an effect on the financial reporting. There were no adjustments to overall cash.
Okay.
Will you go over these journal entries for me and just explain the adjusted versus unadjusted and what PBC is?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
And so I just give this as a summary so you understand, what happens when these adjustments are not made and we have to come in and make them. So the unadjusted, these are fund accounting, not government-wide. So the overall net loss that the town showed on the trial balance we got before we made any adjustments was a loss of $846,000. Once all the adjustments were made, including the adjustments the town gave us, and including our audit adjustments, the town's turned from a loss to a profit of about $550,000.
Okay.
So, that's, $1.3 million difference, in, the bottom line of the town from, the unadjusted trial balance to the final that's reported on the financial statements. PBC is prepared by clients. And so these are ones that the town identified, right before the audit proceedings or during our audit field work that, hey, the auditor's asking about this, or this is something we haven't gotten to yet. We're gonna look at this and we need to adjust these accounts. And so those are ones, like I said, in 2018, they didn't give us these, they weren't looking at these. In 2019, they started looking at some of these things and came up with the adjustments themselves,
Okay.
which, like I said, is the progression that's being made. And the auditor, the $2.4 million, that's one
I got
that we
that.
made as a result of our audit proceedings.
How about the 10.8?
So that's more of a financial reporting misclassification. Like, one of the major ones was just a cash account. Like I said, did not affect overall cash balances. It was just two accounts within the same fund. The numbers were put in the wrong account. So those are ones that, we didn't take, issue with because it was just financial reporting, just cleaning up the accounts.
Let me ask you about one other one. It was page 33 of your report, and it's on page 52 also. For fiscal year ended June 30th, expenditures made for the town's general fund debt service function exceeded authorized appropriations by $16,907.
Yes.
That's not that doesn't fall, is that an adjustment, or is that?
No, that's not an adjustment.
Okay, that's just
What we do is at the high level,
Yeah.
we get the town's budget, and we compare it to the actual final numbers, and anything that's overexpended, if it's material, it's a finding. It was not material, it's well below the materiality threshold, so we just have to disclose that in the notes. There's no finding related to that, that's just an over expenditure of the line.
Okay, how about page 52? There was a
Well, I want you to explain that, because I'm specifically aware of that. That's basically an interest amount that there was an appropriation made for an expenditure that included that interest amount, and it was the auditor's choice to break the interest out to a different line, which the interest is not budgeted separately. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, we look at principal and interest, and, you know, if the entire debt service fund's overexpended, we don't break it out that way. I mean, we can break it out between interest and principal, but if, you know, one item's budgeted for, by the town, we can break it out in the budget, so it's not showing over expenditure, but there was no, total debt service was overexpended during the year, that's principal and interest. And I think it's,
Well, that ain't right.
that's,
We wouldn't have paid a debt service and principal in advance on anything.
page 19, exhibit 5. So if you go to the, kind of the middle of the page, there's a line item called debt service. Let's see,
Yeah.
let's see budgeted and the actual amounts. And you see that,
Okay.
that same 16,907 number is in parentheses as it's overexpended.
This is that damn police car. This that police car. That was a lease purchase agreement. That's what that is.
And I
So
believe that's
the
last payment on that.
yeah, that was the last payment, but those proceeds were recognized in a prior year. So I'm going to tell the board from a budgetary side, there was not a check written that there wasn't an expense line item here.
Like I said, it's not a material amount.
Yeah, I was just curious of what,
That's what it is.
and then on 52, you
Well, I
got,
can tell you what, we won't be trying to save the town money on leasing vehicles anymore. Because all that's done is bite me in the ass for 3 years in a row.
page 52,
Yes.
you got a restatement.
Yes, and so this was previous discussion before we started the audit with David. So there was the Emergency Operations Center loan that was previously under governmental, being shown there. It was being paid out of the proprietary fund, and so you were having transfer in previous years. I don't think the transfer was actually done in 2018, but anyways, since it was really a proprietary fund being used by them, after discussing with David, we came to the conclusion it's better off if it was actually moved to the proprietary fund, so it was just shifting that loan to the proprietary fund.
Okay, thank you.
And that's a direct result of the board adopting a policy not to transfer money from the general fund to other funds and vice versa, and to expense directly to the fund that's using it. So that expense was made in the budget, from a budgetary perspective, from the water and sewer fund, and it was the back shop accounting functions that, and in the original loan documents, the loan was taken out as a general fund loan, but the primary use of that building is water and sewer.
Jay, just out of curiosity, back to your sheet, you show that the adjustments that we prepared were roughly 600,000, and then yours were 2.4 million.
Correct.
What if the whole 3 million had been prepared and presented by us as part of that package? Would that have still been a material weakness?
It depends really on the timing of that. If that's done during field work, that would have been close, because, you know, technically.
No, but let's say it was done even prior to field work, but after we had,
If you had closed the books and made those entries beforehand, the material weakness would have gone away, yes.
okay. But the weakness itself implies that this isn't just a year-end issue. This is a monthly issue.
Yes.
Just the mere fact that we did 3 million on our own, how does that relieve us of that material weakness?
Well, it's going to depend on the accounts, because some accounts are going to be easily accrued, you know, monthly, some are not. Some are you receive quarterly, some, you know, it all depends on which accounts we're talking
Okay.
about, because your various funding, especially from, you know, tax, sales tax, things like that, are going to be coming at different points of the year. Occupancy tax, you know, that's, you know, monthly, but your sales tax quarterly. It all depends on what accounts you're trying to get to. And the general statute says, you know, there's certain accounts, there's no way they can expect the town to base it on modified accrual, because you never get the audit done in time, because you'd be waiting till October to,
Okay.
you know
No,
you get
just-
the funds. So it depends on which accounts you're properly accruing, and which ones you obviously have to wait on. I mean, some of them you don't have to. If it's quarterly, technically you don't have to accrue those, because they don't want you to wait until October to accrue June 30th, receivable, that you're not gonna know for like that many days. They'll never get audits done if you do that.
Okay.
But just realize that that involves estimations on receipts that have not come in yet, and that also opens up the potential for either overestimating or underestimating the revenues that come in, which parlay into a possible weakness on incorrect estimates. Isn't that correct?
Some of these should be hard and fast numbers. I mean, we're testing this during the audit, so we know what the numbers are.
But not on revenues that have that accrue to September.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't expect to know, like I said, quarterly accrual like that. You wouldn't be expecting.
Okay, and in the context of our proprietary fund, specifically our B part fund, our large revenues are occupancy tax, and they come in the summertime, and by virtue a single month of those revenues, the July 4th revenues or the August revenues, those in and of themselves cannot be accrued because just because of the vagaries of it.
But that's the next year. That won't show up till the following June. July and August? Revenue received in July and August?
But the June revenues coming in July, they're actually not due until the middle of July. Okay.
But doesn't the town have like 60 days to identify the cash flow?
Yeah, you'd have a period of which you would, obviously keep the books open. So if you knew there was a June or a July payment coming in that was related to June, you would obviously make that accrual because it relates to the previous fiscal year. Obviously, no one expects the books to be closed on July 1st. You do have, looking at the audit timeline, I mean, most of the municipalities we work with, their books are closed at the end of August. And they get 2 months to make sure they get all the receivables booked and all the payables booked. Because there's some invoices that, whether it's somebody just sending you a late invoice or something for the previous year, they come in late. No one expects things to be closed, the day after June 30th.
Just as a point of comparison, at the bank I worked at, we closed our books in 3 days after the end of the quarter.
I'll do a good job.
Everybody worked night and day to get it
You
done.
don't have inventory, work in process production.
Hey, would you go over to the deficiencies? Well, I think we skipped over those.
Yep, absolutely. And so this was a management letter that was issued. And basically, there's 3 levels of issues we find during the audit, internal controls. Material weakness and significant deficiency. Those are automatic findings. There used to be some leeway you could put in the management letter, but LGC issued a memo a few years back saying no, all significant deficiencies and material weaknesses are required to be as a finding on the audit report. But then there's things that we think the town could do better, and those are just regular deficiencies, not findings. There's no corrective action plan. There's nothing needs to be reported back to us. It's just things we want to let the town know. Hey, this could be a better process, or things that could be done better related to internal controls. One of the things we tested was looking at bank reconciliations. We feel good that the town's reconciling and approvals there. It's just making sure that approval is signed off, so if somebody comes behind you, that bank rec's being approved.
So we don't have the problem we had last year with the software glitch and all that?
No, the bank rec was correct, the ones we looked at. But it's just the approval process, making sure that the recs are having the approval indicated on. We saw some that did and some that didn't.
Okay.
When I say account review and cleanup, this goes back a little bit to the accrual process, but these are a lot of immaterial accounts. These are account balances, both payables, receivables, that have been the same balance for like 2 or 3 years. We recommend the town go back through and make sure that those are actual liability of the town or actual, asset of the town and clean those accounts up. I mean, there's probably 2 dozen of those accounts sitting around. And I say overall immaterial, but it looks funny to have the same balance every year after year, and you clean those up. One of the things, and we're talking about estimates, or David mentioned the estimates, allowance for uncollectible accounts. Currently, those balances will remain pretty much the same the last couple of years. We're recommending the town really look at their allowance. Obviously, if a receivable balance goes up or down, most likely the allowance for uncollectible accounts goes up or down also, but these will remain pretty steady. So the town should really implement a system calculate those, and I said, those are an estimate. Sometimes you know what accounts you're not gonna receive, but some, you're just estimating based on maybe historic collections. Hey, the water and sewer fund usually, I'm just throwing out a number, collects 9% of their billings, so, you would basically say, hey, 10% of the receivable would be uncollectible based on that historic collection. So we just recommend the town go look at their uncollectible accounts, the allowance for uncollectible accounts, and really come up with a good calculation they can use every year to make sure those are solid numbers.
So my guess is the town manager is projecting net where you're saying you ought to project gross receivables and then a line item for uncollectibles.
Yeah, there is a line item for uncollectibles, it's remained the same.
Okay.
So we're looking, it kind of goes back to the second one, account review and cleanup, just going through those and really come up with a good way of, adjusting those. And that's something, you can do at year end every year. Your receivable balance is going to change, obviously. And you can look at those and say, hey, historically, this is what we're collecting out of this account, so we should adjust our allowance based on that.
David, do we have a process for writing off some account that's seriously old in the business accounts?
I'll let Margaret talk about how the taxes are written off. That's probably the most relevant.
We have some old assessments on the book. They're from years back, that's probably, I talked with the auditors when they were here about that. At one point, years ago, one board, we went to them, of course, they were not as old as they are now, and they didn't want us to do anything with them. So it's just, we've got old underground that hadn't been paid, old dredging from when we used to bill when the dredging was done, assessments. Not big amounts on each one, but there are just some staggering out there. And I think there's like one bill from a dune assessment from years ago.
Is there still a viable means of collecting any of those funds legally through, if one of those properties were up for sale, would not those have to be?
Something's up for sale, but usually the things that are selling is stuff that's already, we're getting it paid off. But I mean, like, some of these are like from the, 90s, that have a balance. So I guess it would be up to the commissioners if they wanted to look at the whole thing and then decide, okay, well, these are really old, let's take them off. Is that what you're suggesting, something like that, to?
But there's two things, obviously, if you're collecting accounts, obviously approval and remove those, because you're not collecting. But there's just a general allowance, hey, in the past, we've collected 9% of this revenue fund, we're going to put an allowance of 10% on the receivable, we feel like we're gonna collect 9%. And it's just going through that process on an annual basis, but estimating the allowance, because an allowance is different than a write-off. Allowance, the receivable stays in the books, and you just put an allowance to counteract it. But a write-off is taken completely off.
But, yeah, the ones that's like those that are in the 90s,
Yeah.
Write them off.
But that's what Mark,
Well,
that's what Mark was asking.
no,
What's our policy?
that's why I asked, because, I mean, the normal process, if you do the appropriate accounting, is if you were to write off a super old debt, you would write it off against the allowance account, because
Yes.
theoretically, that's where it would go. But I think in the case of, there are two this is a whole different issue as to whether you should truly write those off, and I don't, because I think you're, quite frankly, a lot of the people that are delinquent are just hoping that happens, that you'll just forget about. It's like the buddy you loaned $100 to in college that, you meet at the reunion that hopes you forgot about that.
something really old and get it paid.
Yeah, legally, that's what I mean. That's a lien against that property that has to be cleared, and I don't know that we, but maybe to his point, as a separate decision to determine whether that needs to be offset by a probability that says maybe this property will never get sold in a reasonable time frame, and therefore I'll increase the allowance. And that's, I guess, that issue he's raising. So, I'm sorry.
That's okay, but you can write it off and not stop trying to collect it. For accounting purposes, take it off the books, so it's not showing up every year. But that doesn't mean that we can't have a little package there saying, we're always waiting for you. When you sell that house, we're gonna collect that money.
Just say, hey, there's a good possibility we don't collect those accounts, so we're just gonna reduce the overall receivable net, because there's an allowance.
We're not counting on this money.
It's gotta be the policy set up by the town. I've seen different people. Some people are very aggressive to say, if somebody owes us money, they steal us money, we're not gonna set up an allowance, because we're gonna get that one day. And there's some people, you say we're gonna base it on historic collections. You just gotta put a policy in place on how that allowance is calculated and update it on an annual basis.
Jay, I want to ask you a question.
Yes,
And once again, I'm more familiar with the corporate world than I am the government world.
sure.
We got the best audit rating you can get, unmodified opinion, right?
That's correct.
Okay. But we have at least one major weakness.
Yes.
At what point would you say, I've given you a modified opinion because of X? I mean, what would take you to the modified opinion?
Well, I mean, like I said, we're giving our opinion on whether the financial statements are materially correct or not. And so with the adjustments, they're materially correct. If, it said we have adjustments and the town refuses to make the adjustments, or it says, no, we don't agree with them, we're not gonna make them, you report the financials as is, we modify opinion, say, no,
Okay.
we don't believe they're materially correct. Another one would be, hey, when we need to see the evidence supporting this account, the town refuses to give us that, then we modify opinion to at least that account. It all depends on our procedures and the evidence we're given to give sufficient evidence to render that opinion. So, majority of the time, you're gonna receive an unmodified opinion. Because, we're gonna go through our audit proceedings. It has to be the town being really uncooperative and giving us stuff, or, refusing to make entries.
Yeah, where I came from, you got a score. If you're below like a 90 or something, you might lose your job, So I'm trying to relate that with how we're doing it here.
Okay.
Anything else?
Did we cover the yellow book fully, or, I mean, it's the third item on here, but, fourth item.
Well, we got an agenda item number 6 to discuss
Okay.
how we're going to.
How we're gonna
Yeah,
handle
deal with
it
that
moving
deal.
forward.
Okay, I'm good.
Anything else?
You good?
Yeah,
Anything else? Mark?
I'm okay.
David, anything else we want from the?
Just that your agenda item is the presentation of the audit report and the committee's recommendation to the BOC.
Right, but we'll take a vote on that if you're done. You're done? Anything else from you?
That's all I have.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
So, do I have a motion one way or the other with regard to our advising the board for tonight's meeting, whether or not we approve, we recommend approval or not?
We can't approve, right? We
No, we
recommend
don't
them,
approve.
we
just
recommend they
recommend.
approve it.
Just recommend to the board.
Okay.
Anybody make,
You gonna make the recommendation?
I move that we recommend approval of the
have a
audit
second?
report as delivered.
Has a second?
And as approved by the,
We don't approve. we
But they
just
haven't
recommend.
approved it. It's just been as submitted, as we have here, which is the version that was submitted to the LGC.
All we can do is recommend to the board of commissioners they approve this.
Right.
no, but I mean, the LGC has
It has
approved
already,
this
but the
report.
board has to
Right,
approve
that's,
it.
that's the only thing that I wanted to add to that, because it's
Okay.
already gone through that
We'll
process,
do
and
that
so.
discussion, but if I can get a second on the.
Second.
Okay.
Giving
Now,
him the
any discussion?
opportunity.
any
Do we need to
discussion
modify
after
the
that
motion
second?
or not? I don't know what.
No, I just,
No,
Okay.
yeah.
We're
okay,
giving
good,
you the
good.
opportunity to do a second.
No, I mean,
Good point.
the mere fact that the government committee's already approved this, I don't know that, yeah, I mean, I don't know that we have any reason why we would.
Unless you knew that something was false in it, and I don't know of anything
Yeah.
false in it.
I
No.
stand by the motion.
Are we ready for a vote?
Yeah.
In favor?
Aye.
Against? It passes unanimous, Madam Clerk. So that moves us to item number 6, discussion and possible recommendation on the town's plan to prepare for the LGC requirements on financial statement preparation. Now, back to your,
Well, I'm just curious what the plan is.
or maybe where we stand. David, can you give us an update on where you think we are?
Just my comment on that is that this is probably outside of the purview of the audit committee's charge, in that it speaks to a plan, and the audit committee's ordinance talks to ensure items or things are in place. So, the plan in preparation to the LGC for excuse me, this is really not correct, because the LGC hasn't come down as to actually how best to implement the audit profession's ethical stance that they can't audit and do the books. So that will be communicated to the commissioners as how they wish to proceed, and then whatever comes out of that would be what I would think that the audit committee, and then it would fall in the audit committee's wheelhouse to follow. I don't see the.
Can you restate that? I'm sorry.
I don't see this as that the audit committee's job is to make a recommendation on what the town's plan is to prepare for the local government commissions on financial statements preparation.
Okay, I was not thinking we were gonna recommend a plan. I was just curious
Well,
where we stand.
the item says discussion and possible recommendation on the plan.
Well,
Okay.
if there was a plan that we could recommend approval of, like we did the audit, then we would recommend approving the plan.
I would venture to say that that's a management action item that I'd take up with the board as how I would recommend to the Board of Commissioners on how they wish to accommodate the financial statement preparation.
Does the LGC go come back with any recommendations how to meet these requirements, GASB requirements?
Well, there was an item on the state treasurer's, the local government, the North Carolina Government Finance Officers convention here recently that I was scheduled to go to, but was unable to attend because it was either the audit committee or the Board of Commissioners called a special meeting. But I would see they would come down with some guidance. Okay. There's the majority of local governments in North Carolina that are dealing with this issue.
Do we know what they're doing?
Some of them don't even know about it. Some of them.
Well, we don't want to be one of those.
Well, actually, this is not new. The LGC published something last year just saying that one of the options.
It may not be new. It may not be new, but there are a number of local government finance officers that do not know this. They're not cognizant of it.
But I hope we're not one of those.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we've known about this for over a year. I mean, it was brought up even back in the RSM report. The issue is, we want to meet our timeline next June. We need to be able to either prepare good financial statements ourselves or have someone under our management control prepare them for us. I mean, to me, it's.
Well, I mean, I would argue the fact that it should be the town and the Board of Commissioners focus to be concentrating on the what and not the how. That is going to be, you know, my challenge or task to bear to figure out how to get it done. And however, you know, when you go to the ice cream store, do you really care how the guy dips the ice cream as long as it's sanitary and it goes in a cone?
I mean, the what to me is simple. We've got to be able to prepare financial statements that the auditor can take and audit.
Or have it.
Or have it done.
Or have a third
somebody
party
do it for
prepare.
us, but that's the what. We've got to have those.
That's right.
I think that, I'm not trying to speak for David, I think the point he's trying to make is his responsibility to figure out how to address this audit item. It's not for us.
Well, which basically says there's no role for the audit committee to help.
I don't know if I go that far, but.
That's what
Well,
I've
if you're
heard.
not going to share it with them, then.
I mean, if you don't want our help, you don't want our help. It seems like we can help. But if you don't want it, that's totally
That's-
Commissioner's call, David's call. We're just trying to help.
Well, let me be clear on one point. Item 6, when this agenda came out, is the first time that I have seen or it has been communicated to me that there was an expectation of a town plan being prepared to meet a suspense out in the future. It's the first time. Okay. Right,
A
John?
suspense?
But we've not
John?
discussed this before?
Now, you and I have not had a discussion on this particular matter. Isn't that correct?
No, I think we have discussed, I mean, we saw, a thing from the LGC a year ago, and we've had meetings about, what are we gonna do? Are you gonna hire somebody? And you did hire somebody for the management discussion analysis, who also is gonna
There
train
has
the staff.
been no discussion between you, I, or anyone on this board specifically about the development of a plan
not a-
in order to meet
Not under those words,
the LGC's.
not with those words.
I absolutely agree, positively.
Okay.
We've known this has been coming for a long time, and we've never talked about how we're gonna address it. I agree. Including right now, we're not gonna talk about how we're gonna address it.
I just stated that that is for me to communicate to the Board of Commissioners as to my proposal on how to deal with this.
Okay,
Okay, I think we're done with item
we're done with
six.
that.
Item number 7, Mr. Hewitt, can you,
And if item number 6 belongs to the Board of Commissioners, I know item number 7 does. I've prepared a report and delivered that to the Board of Commissioners on a protocol to address specific items in that internal control report. I have not received any guidance from them, feedback otherwise, as to their desire on how it should be carried out.
Sounds like that was the report.
Pardon me?
Sounds like that was the report.
When was that? Give it to them roughly.
I believe that my suspense was the 31st of October, and the memo that I delivered was on Thursday, the 30th, the day before. Correct me if I'm wrong. I know that I got it in on time when it was established for me to do it.
what you're saying, David, is you don't want to share any information on internal
It's
control with the audit committee?
It's a public record, and that internal control report was delivered to the commissioners, and time again, they have expressed their guidance to me is to report to them on that. And John, this is like the third time that you have put this on the agenda, contrary to the specific guidance rendered by the board to me in open session during a Board of Commissioners meeting, that is what I was supposed to do. And to subject it to putting on this audit committee's agenda is just not right. It wasn't
David,
right the first time that you
in the
did it.
last
It
meeting-
wasn't right the second time that you did it, and it's not right now.
In the last meeting, regular meeting of the audit, of the board, did the
Of
board not
commissioners.
vote? Board of Commissioners, did the board not vote to say that you would give any information on internal controls that the audit committee asked for?
I believe that was specifically worded that was as the audit chair asked for. And again, once this report or this agenda came out, that is the first time that I have had it communicated to me, and it certainly has not been communicated from you, John, as to what information that you desire to do that. I actually would submit to you that you have that report as a member of the Board of Commissioners.
Of the changes you've made?
No, of the report on the
On your
internal
plan,
control.
on your plan, but not on the changes that have been made. But it's a mute.
That
point if you don't-
report actually contains a status on several of the items in there, as far as the progress that's been made on various items in there. So, you know, specifically in that report, it does not detail items, but in the cover memo for it, it does speak to how I will evaluate and address the issues over time frame.
I think we're done with 7.
I certainly hope so. Beat that.
Future actions for the committee consideration. This is my last meeting as a commissioner and as chair of the audit committee. Going forward, I would recommend to you, those of you that remain on the audit committee, that you give good thought to the audit charter, if you will. And based on some information I've seen today, I would tell you to be cautious, that you maintain an objective position as an audit committee, and it's not meant to be a consultant, either to the board or to the town, but rather to simply evaluate the internal control system, the entire process and the audit process, as kind of a safeguard between the public, the auditor, and the board. It's just it's not a consulting group, but it's a protection group that would warn the board there is an issue, or that this group of qualified people, and we have something we don't have on the board now, we'll be an accountant, a qualified accountant or auditor, a way for them to know that things are okay so far as some qualified people are concerned. It's a service, it's there to help in that regard, but not to be a consultant. And if we did consult, I can tell you as an audit committee chair, you would not be in a position to evaluate that going forward, not in maintaining objectivity. You couldn't be objective in evaluating what you did yourself any more than we're asking the auditor to evaluate his own preparation of the audit report, of the financial statements. So you have to maintain an objectivity, and just, doesn't necessarily take a lot of work, but let the board know that you haven't spotted anything of problems. You've looked at internal controls, they're working fine. The auditor's doing the thing on time. The auditor seems to be doing the job. It should be a fairly easy job, not complex. But if you don't get information from the town or that direction from the board, then it'll be difficult. That's my only parting words for you, I believe. I will thank you. We've got 3 CPAs sitting at the table, 1 missing tonight, a banker with a banking background, good qualified committee, but I'm not sure we were able to do, I am sure we weren't able to do the job we should have done. And going forward, I won't be a part of it, but I hope you give it good thought to how you do what you do.
Before we get
Comments?
done, I
Comments?
mean, my only comment is the term audit committee in the practice of accounting connotates very specific things. And if we're gonna be an audit committee, we should be an audit committee. If we're not, we should call ourselves something else. Because I don't think it's proper to proclaim ourselves as an audit committee if we're not meeting the mandates of what the accounting profession says an audit committee should be. I think we're misleading.
The board could easily form a committee, an advisory committee, on any kind of thing it wants.
Well,
including
I
financial-
just, the
that's what
ordinance that we have in
that's what we
place
need is
establishes
another
us, I
committee.
think, is consistent with what audit
Exactly
committee
what we
means
need.
in the profession.
I agree,
But
yeah.
if we're not wanted to do this, then that's fine, just don't call us an audit committee.
Be a matter for the board. Any other comments?
I would just, couple things, and if I can at least speak to the Board of Commissioners, one thing that we need to avoid is a predicament we got ourselves into this year by waiting until August to get a contract out. And particularly with this changing environment, and my guess, it's going to be a confusing quoting process, because I think if, in fact, the auditing firms back up what they're saying, there's going to be an awful lot of write-up work that's going to have to be done in that. What is our first quarter of our fiscal year, that's going to be busy with auditors scrambling to prepare financials for another firm, or those fortunate enough to have an independent segment, they'll be doing it. But whatever it is, it's going to generate more fees and cost us. But we need to get in that queue so that we at least can get our audit done on time next year, because we may run into a competitive situation if we wait too long. So that's it. And one other minor thing, and I know that you guys did this at a meeting when I wasn't there, but I still would like to see us have, if we're going to continue on with quarterly meetings, set a specific date that when someone joins the audit committee, they're aware of their commitment and the time that they have to, so they can look at their calendar for the year, like we do for all the other committees that I serve on. I know that the 3rd or 4th Tuesday, I've got
We did that.
no, we set some dates, but they're not It's not like the third Wednesday or?
It is,
It is?
yeah.
What
We have
is that?
four of them and one to kick off the audit committee.
Well,
We have
but-
4 quarterly meetings scheduled,
But is it a specific,
specific date, a specific day of the week.
There's a schedule published. I forget what day
The
it is.
second Tuesday?
but-
Is that, Madam Clerk, you remind us?
There's only one more date set, and I'm not sure, I
We
wasn't
had
with you guys
4.
when you said it, so I'm not sure, but the next one is January 10th, so I don't know what day it is.
Is that the second Tuesday?
Let's see.
I would propose whatever that is, that we just set aside that, whatever the
did.
time,
We did.
and what that, if that's the second Tuesday of the month, you can never make it the first, because it
No.
might land on the first, so it always has to be at least the second.
Yes, we did that.
That's actually a Friday, it's the second Friday.
Second Friday, could be the second Friday of the month.
I would propose then that we say of each of those quarter
new-
dates,
of the new
January,
date.
April,
We did. It's documented, it's published.
okay.
Yeah.
Is that the way you have it in the? that it's-
I wasn't, Mandy was the clerk, I was just filling in
Okay,
today.
then-
It's-
I've got it, I've got the schedule she published at home, and I think John's right, we said Fridays, and I thought we said a specific,
It is, yeah.
like second
The
Friday.
first
Okay,
week-
so as
first
long as
week-
that's the case, I can go to my
The first week
calendar
of the new
next year
quarter.
and on the second Friday
Absolutely.
of those months.
The one we couldn't do is the audit
No, I
kickoff meeting,
understand.
because that's a function of when the auditor's available.
Yeah, the January meeting, will be a meeting to, do the upcoming year schedule. Is,
Yeah,
I
you'll
believe
reset the
that's what it
schedule
is.
in
You set it
January-
for
at
a
the
year at
January
a
meeting.
time.
But it's scheduled.
Y'all can't set a schedule here today, but I hear what you're saying, but,
Yeah.
and that's an administrative thing that we'll make sure it gets on that agenda.
But it is the second Friday?
I just went back and looked at the 4 that you guys had done before. The first 2 were the first Friday and the second 2 were the second Friday. But I wasn't there. I honestly don't know how it came
We were
about.
close.
It's all on a Friday.
Okay,
But your point's well made.
Yeah.
yeah. And particularly, we're all subject to reappointment, as I
Yes.
understand it.
So right now, it's on a one-year basis, so everybody's up for reappointment.
And, you know, it'd be nice, and I don't know what, that probably won't be done by
So
the
December,
January.
probably the December meeting.
The ordinance
it
is for the
January?
January
It's
meeting.
for the January meeting.
But it also picks the chair at the January meeting, so it's a little bit confusing, because usually the chair picks the people, so I'm not, that's something we'll have
Well,
to
the
talk
chair
about.
makes a recommendation to
Right,
the
and
Board of
makes it,
Commissioners.
Right, but it's all in January. The
Right.
ordinance reads that every
Doesn't the board select a new audit
So
committee
who's
chair
gonna
in
sit at the
December?
January?
Mm.
Nope,
First meeting?
January.
January.
So do we need to cancel the January meeting, January 11th meeting?
You won't have a chair.
I would suggest that probably doesn't make sense, that without even knowing,
Wait till the
since
board-
technically I don't
wait
know
till
what
the
our
board does
terms
the chair.
expire.
Wait till the board picks a chair.
We have an empty meeting. So, okay, so,
So do we need to vote to tell her to?
Y'all cannot vote, it's not an
It's
agenda item.
Not on the
it's a
agenda.
special meeting.
Sorry, I forgot.
That's okay. So a motion to adjourn?
I moved.
A second?
Favor? Aye.